back to the Wealth Witches podcast. I'm your host, Katelyn Magnuson, and today we have Melissa Hoyer. She's a certified financial planner and a life wealth coach at the Wealth Conservancy. She specializes in helping inheritors navigate complex financial situations, empowering them to manage their wealth wisely and live fulfilling lives. Combining financial planning with life coaching, Melissa brings a holistic approach to guiding clients toward peace and confidence in their financial decisions. Outside of work, Melissa is a busy mom of a teenage daughter and an active, adorable dog. She loves hiking with friends, being in nature, making jewelry, cold plunging, and belly dancing. She is endlessly curious about ways we can live in greater joy, well-being, and harmony with each other and the natural world around us. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with you today. Thank you.
I'm so excited for it, and especially the topics that we're going to be discussing. So we're going to be chatting about self-love in the wealth space and mapping your money personality. So I'm really excited for both of these. I know we were chatting about it before we started recording, but where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with self-love because I feel like that is the key to abundance and prosperity, and even more feeling a sense of abundance and prosperity. So let's start with that.
Absolutely. I'm excited. Okay.
And, when I think of self-love, I don't know what comes to mind for you. Like there's so many feelings that I get flooded with.
I mean, for me, self-love is feeling grounded in my body and content and nourished and rested and just so many like in the moment present feelings versus, the antithesis of that to me is almost like anxiety or stress or, any of those emotions or feelings or, exhaustion. And those all have a time and place. But yeah, for me, feeling really content and grounded, I think is part of the core of self-love when I think of it.
Right, exactly. And for me too, and I'm sure for everybody, that's a similar experience. And it's just this sense of like wholeness, wellness, feeling regulated. Everybody's talking about regulating your nervous system. And it's like a regulated nervous system. And from that like stillness in our heart, I feel like there's such a sense of peace. And at the root of that is receiving.
Absolutely.
And worthiness. Like, am I worthy to receive love? And am I worthy to receive abundance? And even more important, am I worthy enough to feel abundant regardless of my circumstances? So I think self-love is absolutely the key. And for some reason, it just hits the core. It's like, one of our challenges as humans is to be able to allow ourselves to love ourselves and feel that sense of contentment. So that's the key. That's the key, easier said than done probably, but just having that, feeling good. And I think from there comes a sense of like total paradigm shift where we feel the sense of enoughness. I love the way Lynn Twist talks about it in her book called The Soul of Money, but she talks about how, like we wake up in the morning and we're like, oh, I got to get there. There's not enough time. I've got to do this. I got to do that. I didn't get enough sleep. I don't have time for breakfast. There's never enough. And from this place of just self-love and self-care, and I was practicing really intentionally this morning, knowing I was about to have this conversation and feeling the same way. Oh, I've got to get there. I am on a podcast. I better do my hair. And oh my gosh, there's not enough time. But I just didn't do that. I decided not to do that and just practice self-love and self-care. And what a paradigm shift. What a paradigm shift of just feeling that sense of enoughness.
How do you circuit or pattern interrupt that? Because I think for so many of us, we fall into these old patterns of, this is what you do. This is how you're wired. These are the things, you do what you know and what you've grown up doing. And when you decide, because I know I've gone through this and I haven't found a good way to articulate this. So I'm really interested in your thoughts on it. But when you're trying to have this paradigm shift, you're trying to change, your behaviors and have an abundance practice or gratitude practice, how do you notice that you're in an old pattern and stop that or interrupt that?
One of the easiest techniques I've used for a very long time, and this stems from my coaching I did with a coaching company called Life XT, and they wrote a book called Life XT, Life Cross Training and Ancient Wisdom Traditions that improve our health and well-being now. In that program, there's a practice called Notice, Shift, Rewire. So part of it is just the awareness.
Okay.
And, when I read that book by Lynn Twist, I'm like, oh yeah, I do that too. I wake up and I feel rushed immediately. And I may not have noticed that until I read it. So I think just hearing this now, people may have more of an awareness and when that happens. So you can catch yourself in it. And that's the noticing part. And the shift is like, that could be anything. It could be breathing, doing the square breath, inhaling for 4 seconds, holding it for 4, exhaling for 4, holding it for 4, that kind of thing. It could be breathing just to slow yourself down to remember, oh yeah, everything's okay. I'm going to get there. You are allowing yourself space to make a choice in that moment. Wow. So there's so many different ways, but that's one way that I do it is just like, yeah, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, there are other options here.
There are other options, exactly. And I think just slowing down enough to remember that there's other options and what it is that you really want, that's the main thing. Absolutely. So yeah, I suppose that's my pattern interrupt. And by the way, years ago, someone said to me during my coach's training, which I remember to this day, he said, and he was I think he may have had a Buddhist background. He said, you can't hurry and not be in a hurry. And that was a total game changer for me because then our state of being, I still have to get to work on time. I still have to do all the things. And I can do that with a sense of the enoughness, like it's all going to work out, savoring the moment, remembering to look at the beautiful tree on the drive in and feeling my breath. And I somehow miraculously still get to where I'm going.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were talking about that this morning, I was thinking about it is amazing to me when I get into busy season, which we're on the cusp of right now. And it's so easy to put off caring for myself, working out. I don't have time. I can't XYZ. It's shocking when I do actually prioritize doing those things. Everything else still manages to get done. Yeah. And my day seems significantly better. And I feel better at the end of the day. And it's a really interesting study for me every tax season to see how that plays out.
Got it. Yeah. Are you preparing tax returns?
Oh, yes.
Ah, okay. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Tis the season.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. It's I don't know why it's so hard to prioritize self-care in a busy season, but it just is. And it always makes such a difference.
It really does.
So, yeah. And, that said, it's all being in that place of the regulated nervous system, feeling calm and balanced. And then we can make better decisions. And that's a huge part of your financial world is decision making. And then we're in that place of self-trust and really hearing our, what's important, what matters in this moment and what's our intuition and really trusting that, especially in the financial world. I think that's so important is to trust your gut.
Absolutely. Something that you touched on earlier that I did want to kind of dive into a little bit deeper was, I think I'm going to paraphrase here, but feeling into abundance when you're not in a place of financial abundance yet, I think is something I'd love to hear more about. It's the way that I would look at it is not necessarily fake it till you make it. There are other ways that I've heard it said, but, putting yourself in this space of I am abundant and like recognizing the things in your daily life. But what does that look like to you in practice for someone that's maybe not where they want to be, or they don't feel wealthy yet, or, they're on their way, but they're not there?
Right. Something you said, I think hits the nail on the head. And I think it's broadening our definition of abundance from beyond financial abundance. There's so many forms of capital in our life, right? Like emotional, spiritual, financial, social. And so no matter what, there's an abundance of something. And even if you're out of a job and concerned about bills, and that's a very scary place to be, and taking a deep breath and recognizing I have an abundance of time. I get to spend more time in nature with my family or whatever it is. And yes, there's still the other things present. And it's where you're choosing to place your attention in that moment.
Absolutely.
In a way, it's like easy to feel abundant when everything's going well. And we all know in life, it has its ups and downs. So being able to practice, when it doesn't count and practice when things are challenging, we're really developing our skill of trust and abundance in those moments.
I think that's so easily overlooked because I think so many people do just think of financial abundance as one of the only, traditional ways to be abundant or to be wealthy. And yes, it's absolutely one part of it, but there's so many other facets. And that brings me to the next question that I had is I have had clients over the years that have gone from, blue collar workers to multimillionaires that have grown businesses. And from my experience, having more wealth doesn't automatically fix everything. If you still have patterns or habits or fears, those can still come up just in, a potentially larger scale or more impactful scale. So what does the work that you do with wealthy individuals look like to help with their overall wellness, I would guess, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're exactly right, is that wealth is really a magnifier of what exists in you in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Money, that's the biggest myth, is we all dream about that moment when we have a lot of money, we don't have any more problems. And of course, that's not true. We all know that. And really, wealth is just magnifying whatever's there. So if you're an introvert and don't want to interface, you have wealth, you can pay people to do that, and you don't have to do that. And then you're not going through that challenge, right? When we work and we have to face our limitations and things like that, we grow as a person. And I think that's one of the challenges of being a wealthy person, is that you may stop growing if you're not challenging yourself and being mindful of that.
I didn't think of that. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So I would say one of the number one things along those lines that makes us feel that sense of contentment and joy and happiness is flow. Like when we're in a situation when we're challenged, we have some skill to meet that challenge, and we go through that experience and it grows us as a person. And that is such a fulfilling experience that brings us joy and happiness. And it also takes a little bit of like, I have to do this, because it's really easy to fall into feeling comfortable and safe. So if you're in a situation where you don't have to do something and you feel comfortable and safe, you're not evolving as much as a person. So I'd say in working with clients, one of the things is to continue to create containers where you can grow and be challenged and things like that.
That's a really interesting thing for me to think about, because that I had not seeing that myself and knowing how fulfilled I feel when I'm in a state of flow, or when nothing feels better than being able to utilize my skill set. It's something that I enjoy and that I'm good at and that I can be successful in pursuit of, whether it's a business pursuit, a personal pursuit, or something else, and being able to brush up against those edges.
Yeah.
And have a challenge. And I think it's really interesting because, yes, hypothetically, you could be at a spot financially where you could pay to eliminate a lot of those challenges. And then where does that leave you? And potentially unfulfilled or, uninterested, a little apathetic.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
That's really interesting.
So I'd say part of it is just continuing to see the spark and say yes to the spark in life, no matter what. Yeah,
absolutely. When it comes to self-love in the wealth space, you specifically, I know one of the topics that you like chatting about is developing passion for yourself as a wealthy person. And so when you think of developing passion for yourself, what comes to mind with that? Is it this idea of the spark?
Yeah, it really is. I would say for passion, of course, there has to be self-love, right? That is the foundation for everything. You have to feel worthy of feeling good, of having joy, of pursuing a passion. You have to give yourself permission to pursue that passion, just permission to thrive. And a lot of times with wealth, there may come guilt with that. And, people who are wealthy are villainized in our culture. So there may be a sense of hiding it. And so just to be able to, give yourself permission to be joyful and pursue your passions is the first step.
I love that. I did want to move into the second part of this, unless you have more to add on the self-love side, because I feel like the self-love actually really intertwines with the second topic that we're going to be covering. So I want to chat about mapping your money personality. And within that, you and I kind of chatted, it's how are you utilizing your pre-existing tendencies, behaviors, or money motivations? So if you're comfortable kind of laying out a hypothetical for us, just for everyone here that can be envisioning, like you're working with a client that has gone from A to B, and what does A to B look like?
hmm Well, okay. Something that popped into mind, and
Yeah.
there's so many examples, but I guess to lay the foundation, I do this archetypal assessment with clients,
Mhm.
and it shows what their money archetypes are, their top money
Okay.
archetypes. And that's kind of the beginning of the conversation. And really, you know what an archetype is? It's like a common pattern across time and space that people tend to have. Like in this case, there might be an accumulator or a ruler or a connector, or different things like that. And how do those archetypes do money? So we start with that. And, I was working with one younger woman, and she took the assessment, and she's an inheritor. And she realized that her top archetype was her dad's voice. And then the archetype that was below it, because we look at the top three archetypes, was her. Like that was what's in her heart. That's how she would do it. And so I think just the awareness of like where all this comes from, and oh, I'm not wrong. This is my dad's voice. And there's a lot of value to what he's been teaching me. And here's what's in my heart. And guess what? That's okay too. So that's one of the ways that you can work with it. And then instead of having all this friction, or I'm not doing it right, I'm not okay, falling out of self-love, right? Or trying to get approval by doing it this way, you're in much more balance and harmony. And then you can pursue all those things that bring joy and passion.
I love that. When someone like that, basically, where their, top archetype is something other than what's in their heart,
Mm-hmm.
how is it just kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where it's a practice of noticing so that you're able to be pursuing your wants, your desires?
Yeah, it's noticing and it's creating a vision, and it's really deciding like, okay, inventory. I think of it as like going through an attic, right? And you're going through all these old boxes, like, oh, that's what's in there. So you're really taking inventory of your thoughts and your beliefs and what actions that leads to and what results are coming from that, and deciding, you know what, this really serves me. This just doesn't anymore. It's okay,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And you know what? Here's what else I'd like to add to this foundation of thoughts and beliefs and attitudes. And I'm going to, practice it, right? Fake it till you make it in a way, right? And so then you just create this vision of who you are at your best with money.
I love that. So you incorporate life coaching with what you're doing at your firm. With that, with the life coaching side of it, because I've, chatted with CFPs in the past, and I was really intrigued in, learning more about you, because it looks like you're coming in at this from a much more holistic standpoint, which I feel like has the potential to, one, be much more impactful, and to serve the clients that you work with significantly in a fuller capacity, basically, because you're not just, not to downplay like your CFP services, but you're not just laying out, this is where it is, this is where you can be going, this is what everything looks like, but it's taking action that's aligned with them, like helping coach them with that. And what has the difference been for you since incorporating life coaching into your business with clients?
Mm-hmm. Well, just kind of summarize what you said a little bit is I like to go from the transactional nature of the financial
Mm-hmm.
part to the more transformational
Mm-hmm.
piece. And so I do think that that's one of the impacts, is it can be transformational to go through this process for people. And more than anything, it creates such deep relationships. I work with people for years and years and years. And when I really know someone, then I can really be more of assistance.
Mm-hmm.
I can really know, like, I know that person really wants this. And like, okay, right now, I'm here to remind you of that. So it's really fulfilling to be able to help people in a very like deep, fundamental way, so I can see them blossom and have the life that they desire.
Absolutely. No, I think that that's really impactful, and like has to feel so good for you to be able to, be that person for so many individuals that may not have someone else like that in their life, because, diving into finances, is we've seen, I'm sure you've seen, can be interesting to say the least for so many people. It can bring up so many, deep-seated emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and even taking the first step to have that discussion can be such a huge step forward. So when
Mhm.
you're, going over these money archetypes, what are some of the different like money archetypes that you look at when you do this mapping?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see if I can remember. I think there might be 6 or 8 archetypes. So one of the archetypes is an alchemist.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these archetypes have their, positive side and their, shadow side, so to speak. And again, that goes back to the self-love. When we're really feeling nourished from the inside out, we're feeling balanced. And then the positive side of these archetypes can really flourish. So there's alchemists, and alchemists are, it's almost like a matter of life and death to do what's sustainable, what's right, socially responsible investing and, doing what's sustainable. And that looks different for different alchemists, but that's one of the archetypes. And so that's an important thing to know about someone when you're working with them.
Right.
And let's see, we have a ruler. Rulers are often the entrepreneurs and business creators. They love to create something that will last and share their abundance and give people opportunities and make a difference. There's connectors. I'm a connector, so it's no surprise that I'm a coach, financial planner, and I love relationships, and connectors are very optimistic and just kind of know everything's going to be okay. That's a connector. And a lot of financial planners might be accumulators. Those are the ones who love counting the numbers and looking at that. The shadow side of an accumulator, for example, is they're really good at, saving. It can be much more challenging for them to invest in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's nurturers, and those are the people who love to give. So they may even, receive their joy and happiness and maybe even self-worth, if it's getting to one extreme, from giving to others. And their challenges, they may over give and feel resentful, or maybe overgive and, have a problem in their financial world because they're giving too much. So nurturers. And there's celebrities. And celebrities are the ones who, love stylish things, and it's said they're very good for the economy, and really what they can illuminate at their highest and best is the good in the world, and they can promote those things. I think the last one is romantic. Romantics are like your inner hedonist and the ones who just appreciate beauty and good things and things like that. I think those are the main archetypes. And all of them they have their gifts and strengths, and they have their challenges that go along with it.
I'm assuming when living in alignment or, living as their kind of best, most abundant self, we see a lot of the positives. And when, living in a state that's not ideal for them, we see a lot more of that like shadow side essentially of those.
Yes. That's absolutely the goal. And so there's lots of activities once you have this awareness of who you are naturally, then, how can you lean into your gifts and what's holding you back? How is it holding you back? And, what would it look like to do that successfully in a way that honors your style, who you are?
Do you find patterns amongst the people that you work with falling into certain archetypes over others? Or is it really kind of across the board?
I feel like it's really across the board.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone is such an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And what gives each of these archetypes their flavor is the combination of archetypes.
Okay.
So like one alchemist might be combined with a ruler, and they're going to start the movement for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another alchemist might be a connector, and they're going to be doing like the one-on-one, being a mentor or whatever it is. Like that is what gives each archetype their individual essence, which is really, really fun to see.
Within the archetypes, what are some of the examples of, those like utilizing your pre-existing tendencies? If you could pick one of the archetypes and, hey, if you are this archetype, this is what living in alignment really looks like for you. And this is what could be expressed if you're living out of alignment.
Mm-hmm. Well, what came to mind, because, is the nurturer. And I would say like nurturers love to give. And they're also, smart about money, but they may, if they're in a sense of well-being within themselves, and I think nurturers can give in a way that uplifts people on the planet. In other words, like, I'm not doing this for you because I know you can't do it. So here's my gift to you. But they're saying, look, you're amazing. I know this small gift will help you on your way to wherever, but they're sort of giving from a place of wholeness and upliftment. Maybe the shadow side is more of the rescuer, or I want this person's love, so I'm going to say yes. I don't want to, but I don't know how to say no. And I think that's where the giving can not feel as good in either direction.
That makes total sense. There are some people that come to mind that I can think of where I could see both sides of that for their behaviors.
Yeah.
So what's a way for someone that's listening to learn more about their, specific flavor or combination of archetypes?
Well, they could take the assessment, the Sacred Money Archetypes assessment. And that would be the best way to learn about it, because you have to take the assessment first. And anyone is welcome to reach out, and I'm happy to send the assessment to whoever would like to learn more about it.
So when you start with a client, I'm assuming you have them all take their Sacred Money Archetype assessment so that you can have, I kind of look at it, the way that you were describing it reminds me a little bit of how, like, you can have someone that's a Taurus sun, but if they're a Scorpio rising, it's completely different than someone that's like a Sagittarius rising. And like the unique combination gives it, how you express yourself, how you best show up in the world. You then, I'm assuming, sit down and sort of discuss where someone is, someone that has inherited and is in the spot of just having like, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm not sure what I want to be doing. What does that look like for you when you do sit down to work with someone after having had them take their, Sacred Money Archetype quiz?
So that is definitely the beginning. So it's kind of a process that goes from inside to future to now, if you had to break it up in that way. And it's a process of, going into the proverbial attic and undoing all the boxes and seeing really what are your beliefs and attitudes, both, just in life that you've accumulated. And then we do the Sacred Money Archetypes in that process as well. And what are the motivations? And we just try to uncover all of that in the beginning and decide and make a conscious choice about what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep going forward.
Something that I've seen that I'm kind of intrigued by with all of this is you had mentioned how there can be this vilification of looking at wealthy individuals. So what happens, if you find yourself wealthy as someone that wasn't wealthy, and dealing with that duality of, having held this belief, but then now you're this, what does this mean about you? And like, how do you do good in the world?
Right. Well, growth. I call that growth. But I think it's important to know that when you have a life-changing event like that, that it is a transition. And I love to work with the model, the adaptive change model. So that's like you're going along in life and all of a sudden you have a liquidity event and now you're a multimillionaire. And your whole life just changed. And all the things that you thought were true are no longer true. We call it the cauldron of chaos because it's just like, it's an uncomfortable place. And a lot of times you'll want to go back to the way it was, right? You'll abort the change, you'll do what you can, denial, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it's still there. So at some point, you just have to go through the cauldron of chaos. And you will pop out on the other side eventually. And that cauldron is really uncomfortable. And it's also a beautiful place because it's an opportunity to grow. And so part of the coaching process is just trying stuff on. Well, what would happen if rich people weren't wonderful?
Yes.
And, what if? And it's just about trying on different hats and beliefs and then noticing, again, going back to self-love is like really being attuned to your body and yourself to notice what feels true to you. And then eventually you start to get a picture. And eventually you're like, oh, I just made it to the other side. Whoa, which is pretty amazing.
I love the cauldron of chaos as a term. I've never heard that before phrased that way, but as a transformative experience, that's a really
Mm-hmm.
good visual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like the hero's journey or something too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go into the underworld, you have all these challenges, it's really hard, and you find your own strength. And it can be really, really amazing.
Yeah. As someone that grew up very blue collar middle class, it has been really interesting for me, having been in an environment that vilified a lot of wealthier individuals,
Mm-hmm.
to go, how am I going to hold the fact that I too want to have wealth and make an impact, but
Mm-hmm.
also thinking that wealthy people are greedy, any of these words that you could put to them that have
Yes.
negative connotations. And it
Right.
has been delightful to have both clients and friends now that have either built or inherited or gained wealth of some sort, and to see the good and the change and the
Mm-hmm.
impact that they're able to make, because
Mm-hmm.
it is such an amplifier. These were
Mm-hmm.
amazing people to begin with, and so seeing them
Mm-hmm.
have wealth
Right.
has been such a great motivator to
Yeah.
want to also have wealth. Not so I
Mm-hmm.
can sit here and be a little dragon and,
Mm-hmm.
accumulate it all, but because of
Right.
the impact they can make around them. They can help
Mm-hmm.
support small businesses, their
Yeah.
friends. They can, donate to charities and move the needle forward, which is
Totally.
amazing.
Yes. And if they held on to that belief that they would not be okay if they had money, they would not be able to have that impact. So you hit the nail on the head, and why it's so important to take a look in those boxes to see what's in there and what your thoughts
Mhm.
are. What are they keeping you from that you might want to do?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If someone is wanting to learn more about this or wanting to work with you, I know that you work one-on-one with your clients, but what other ways, or are there other ways for people to work with you or learn more about this?
Well, I have this private coaching program that is sort of in and of itself called Way into Wealth.
Mhm.
So that's one way to work with me. It's an 8 session thing, 8 weeks or longer if needed. Other than that, working with me as a financial planner, then you become a client of the firm,
Mhm.
and that's more of a longer term engagement. So those are the 2 ways at this point in time that you can work with me. And I always welcome anyone if they're wanting to, take the assessment. I'm happy to hand out the assessment. I could do, single coaching sessions to go over your results. Like that's a possibility as well. So I'd say
Mhm.
that those are the best ways to work with me at this point in time.
That's awesome. So we will frequently have people reach out to us that are trying to be proactive, right? Maybe they're not sure if they're in a situation to merit working with us yet, but they have questions or they want to kind of be proactive. Is that something too where, you have these proactive conversations with individuals, hey, this is where I'm at right now. Is this something, or when would it make sense for me to engage further?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone is welcome to call, and you can check out our website, thewealthconservancy.com. You can check out the coaching program Way into Wealth website as well and read up. And if you're like, yeah, I think that there's something here, absolutely, please call. We'd love to talk.
Yeah, I think that that's something that comes up a lot for people is, is it time yet? Am
Mm-hmm.
I going to benefit from this? And I think you don't know if you don't take a little bit of time to do some research or to ask the questions. And
Mm-hmm.
with the program, that you're doing right now, what does that, you said it's 8 sessions. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit more about it?
Yeah, right. Okay. So the 8 sessions are everyone has a purpose and a takeaway.
Mhm.
And on the website, if you go to the website, you can see exactly what each session is and exactly what you'll do and what the intended takeaway is from each session. But that's the process where we start from the internal
Okay.
dialogue, thoughts, beliefs, and being really conscientious about what you're choosing to take with you going forward. And, in between from the first 2 sessions, we work with a challenge. And
Okay.
we do a coaching session to really have a breakthrough around a challenge you're experiencing in your financial world that might be holding you back. And then we move into visioning, like, who are you as a wealthy person? Who are you as having a great relationship with money? What does that look like? And we get really clear about that, both from a visioning perspective, as well as here are the habits that I'm going to let go of, and here are the new ones that I'm going to start doing. So there is some tangible pieces that come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do another session on the cauldron of chaos.
Okay.
And using self-compassion to navigate change, because when you decide to like change everything, then it can be challenging, right? You might get blowback from relatives or family or what's going on from your own inner critic.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do a session on how to navigate change.
Okay.
And then finally, we end up with putting the roadmap together and addressing all the different areas of your financial world, including purpose and meaning and relationships and things like that. And putting together a vision for those and a timeline and next steps and things like that. So by the time people leave, they feel confident and clear about what it is that they're doing next.
I love that. That sounds really valuable.
Thank you. The program is called Way into Wealth.
Awesome. I asked for myself because I do think it's really interesting. That's one of my favorite parts about having the podcast is I get to meet so many interesting business owners and individuals that are putting out just magic into the world. And I think being able to alchemize where you're at, where you're going, what's coming through is really powerful. So thank you, Melissa. This has been fantastic.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm so curious too about what you do in your work. So we'll have to talk about that too.
We will.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Wealth Witches podcast. I hope our magical money talks have left you feeling empowered and inspired. Remember, wealth isn't just about dollars in the bank. It's about abundance and financial freedom in all aspects of your life. I'm Katelyn Magnuson, encouraging you to keep challenging the status quo and embrace your inner witch on this financial journey. Until next time, stay magical.